Hi, this is Mike Ash with Plausible Labs. Let's talk about Swift's ExpressibleBy literal protocols. Literals are expressions in your source code where the value is written directly as part of the code. When you type a number into your code, that's a numeric literal. When you type a double-quoted string, that's a string literal. The language knows about the standard literal types. When you write an integer literal, you get an int. Strings are strings, arrays are arrays. Literals can be used to express other types besides the default types. For example, this function takes a uint16. When calling it with a 42 literal, that literal is interpreted as a uint16, not an int, to match the parameter type. If you had a variable of type int, passing that variable would result in a type error. The default types are special, but the rest are not. You can make your own types do the exact same thing as uint16 here. You do this by conforming to the appropriate protocol. Here's the full list of ExpressibleBy literal protocols currently in Swift. These are all the different kinds of literals supported by the language. To find them, or for more information about them, search for ExpressibleBy literal in the documentation. Here's an example. This version struct is a wrapper around an int. It gives us some extra type safety over using int directly. However, we also want to be able to write versions as numbers in the source code without boilerplate. By implementing ExpressibleBy integer literal, we can write an integer any place the code wants a version. To implement it, conform to the protocol, then implement the initializer the protocol requires. The initializer receives an integer parameter, which you can then assign as your value. If you have a function that takes a version, you can pass in a literal integer for that parameter. You still get type safety with other expressions. If you try to pass an int variable, for example, the compiler complains. Other literal types are almost the same. Here's an example for dictionary literals. We normally use dictionary literals to create, well, dictionaries, but we can make our own types from them too. This headers struct contains a list of header values, which are pairs of strings. We implement the ExpressibleBy dictionary literal protocol to take an array of pairs of strings, construct the header values, and set the property. You can use a dictionary literal to create a headers value to pass in as a function parameter or anywhere else the compiler expects to find headers. You can't pass a string-to-string dictionary stored in a variable or derived from some other expression, though. A lot of these protocols have associated types that are used in the initializer. For example, ExpressibleBy dictionary literal has key and value, which are the first and second elements of the pairs. The initializer receives an array of those pairs. This gives you a lot of flexibility in what you accept. For example, the headers type only accepted string and string here, so other types of dictionary literals would be invalid. The built-in dictionary type uses generics to accept any type for value and any hashable type for key. You can do something similar with your own constraints to fit your needs. When you have a type that conforms to one of these protocols, there are several ways to use it. You can write a literal for a parameter when calling a function that takes your type. You can do the same thing with an operator that takes your type. This is essentially the same as calling a function that takes your type. If the operator is overloaded, for example a custom plus operator, then at least one side will have to have the proper static type so the compiler knows which one to call. You can use a literal as a variable initializer as long as you explicitly specify the type of the variable. And finally, you can explicitly type any literal by writing as your type after the literal. This can be useful when calling an overloaded function where the compiler can't infer which overload you want, or just to make your code more explicit. To summarize, the ExpressibleBy literal protocols let you write a literal to create a value of your own custom type. To use them, you should 1. Find a type that would be useful to write as a literal. If you have a type where it makes sense to write it as a string, or array, or integer, or other literal, and it would help make your code more clear, that type is a good candidate. 2. Find the ExpressibleBy literal protocol that corresponds to the type of literal you want to use. If it's numbers, you'll want ExpressibleBy integer literal or ExpressibleBy float literal. Arrays are ExpressibleBy array literal. Check the documentation for a full list of what's available. 3. Conform to the protocol. This is easy. Add it to your type declaration or as an extension. 4. Implement the initializer from the protocol. If the protocol has associated types, you'll need to decide what types you'll accept here. Write code to initialize your stored properties from the initializer parameter. 5. That's it. you can now create instances of your type by writing out the appropriate literal at a place where the compiler expects to find your type. That wraps it up for now. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, check out our Swift workshops where you can spend a day with me learning more about Swift in depth. You can learn more about our workshops at plausible.coop/training. I hope to see you there.